today, right? And you've got your learner resource for that in there. Okay, and you'll find that in that learner resource, which is it's called Topic 1, Lead Communication in the Workplace. The first chapter is called Establish Communication Protocols. And that's what we're covering today. Everybody make sense of that? And I'll keep moving. Thanks, Alan. I'll let you mute yourself again. Good work, everybody, on keeping muted. Appreciate that. So communication protocols are a vital element in all our exchanges that can determine how well you and your client can meet established goals. So it might be you and your client, or it might be you and your staff if you're a team leader or manager. To effectively lead communications, you begin by establishing communication protocols. So communication protocols may cover a wide range of situations and organisational needs. Well thought through protocols are essential to guide and manage smooth and effective communication. Communication protocols are a framework of rules designed to ensure correct processes in the smooth transmission of information. How an exchange is to take place between the parties. In professional relationships, communication protocols follow conduct which is culturally and socially accepted. They are fundamental in workplace communication. The formal, and basically what they are, here's a definition: the formal systems and processes through which you communicate within the organisation. Each organisation or party involved in information exchange has a responsibility to relay its communication protocols so they can be followed. So you relay those to your staff. You will be completing activities related to the development of communication protocols in your practical workbook or your learner assessment pack. So you're going to learn how to create and implement a communication protocol. Establishing rules around communication about how communication is conducted or implemented can benefit every kind of relationship. We've already discussed that. In order to create the protocol, you need to consider your audience, the communication need or goal, how you are communicating, whether it's going to be a written, oral, so that's going to be in the context as well, the frequency that you will be using that particular protocol. Within an organisation, communication protocols describe how data is exchanged between the parties depending on the goal and information needs. For example, email templates, website copyright and content, meeting templates. This involves planning stages, as we said before, analysing information needs relevant to the workplace goals. So let's have a little talk about these. Analysing the information needs relevant to the workplace goals. So what might be a workplace goal? How about increasing your sales? What might be an information need in order to get those sales increased? Perhaps it's going to be a different marketing tact. It depends on how you want to increase those sales. Is this going to be through, do you want to increase your referrals? Do you want to increase your number of cold contacts? Do you want to increase the number of sales, from one contact that has perhaps bought from you already? And then, of course, the information need to follow through on that is going to be different depending on each scenario. So you can see that you're going to end up with many protocols depending on the information need. Developing communication protocols according to identified needs and goals. Identifying contexts you must adapt your protocols to. So how you reach out to generation X might be different to how you reach out to the baby boomer generation, correct? preparing materials to support and help implement communication protocols. Emails, designing your marketing templates. And here's an example. As a coach, you want to support empowering behaviour in your clients. So you have a written set of communication guidelines which you convey to your client. One guideline within your communication protocol may be the disuse of the phrase "I can't" during coaching sessions. You will also have overarching communication protocols you apply to your own coaching process, i.e. email templates, forms, etc. Analysing information needs relevant to your workplace goals. So this is the first one of those 4 things that you need to do. To establish communication protocols sufficiently, you need to analyse information needs relevant to your workplace. Information needs are the pieces of knowledge that you expect from an information source. Your information source can be external or internal. These information needs are fulfilled through different forms of communication, which are also known as your communication needs. Now, everybody who's here except one student or anyone who hasn't done their induction yet, you really do want to be doing your induction before you come here. Now, one thing that you'll know with your learner resource from doing your induction is the quick trick that we show you with the find function. So I'll just pull that up quickly. This is your learner resource. I've got the find function open already. I'm going to close that. So here we are, lead communication in the workplace. Now, what we were just talking about in the slides there, if you've got Adobe Reader, just on the top left-hand side, you've got File, Edit, and we click on Edit and we go Find, and we can type a word in there. So we were talking about information needs, correct? So we're just going to type information need in the search. And you can see the search is going to present every time that phrase information need comes up in your learner resource. Now, the reason I'm just coming back to this and showing you this now is everything that we are talking about is just it's like a very simplified version of what's in your workbook. So anything we're covering today, it's all in your workbook. If there's key things that you're finding that are really good pieces of information that's helping you to understand this better, by all means take a note of that if you've got pen and paper in front of you. But just remember, there's no need to be writing down everything I'm saying because it is actually in your workbook as well. Yeah. All right. Just coming back now to your slides. And we'll move on to the next one. Information needs are the pieces of knowledge that you expect from an information source, as we said before. Those information needs are fulfilled through different forms of communication, which are also known as your communication needs. To establish your protocols sufficiently, you need to analyse information needs relevant to your workplace. It's a little bit repetitive here, but you'll find that there's a bit of a spiral going on as we build on concepts. Internal communication needs, and there's some examples of what they may be. Might be induction training, could be the intranet, so to facilitate staff-to-staff communication or office-to-office, memorandums, reports, anything that conveys information needed within the organisation is internal. External forms of communication between the organisation and its external stakeholders. So those stakeholders could be investors, it could be clients, range of what they could be. Business meetings, emails, newsletters, social media, all examples of external communication needs. Right, so develop communication protocols to meet needs and goals. A communication protocol always has a goal reason for existing. Without a goal or an aim, we don't need a communication protocol. So there's always, within the workplace or your own business, you are always intentionally working towards a goal. And that means everything that you're doing is going to fit somewhere into a communication protocol, pretty much. Communication protocols are developed around your requirements. Organizational goals could be long-term aspirations and purpose. They could be the bigger picture towards which all undertakings are aligned, or they actually could be smaller, short-term protocols. And information needs also relate to your audience, what information and in what format is required by your audience. More consideration for how that protocol is structured. Developing communication protocols. So the key element of communication protocols are the scope, the information need, the person responsible, and there's more on the next page as well. So let's just have a look at these key elements, because this is highly relevant now to the first task in your workbook. Okay, so scope is the extent to which your communication protocol would operate and who will use and be affected by that protocol. That could be your clients. Information need is the basis of the structure of your communication. And the person responsible is who is in charge of implementing that protocol. This may be yourself, a manager or employee, someone that you delegate it to. Medium of communication is another element. The channel or means through which you transmit your messages could be email, intranet, on-site, print, social media, video conference. And your audience, those you are directly communicating with, as opposed to the scope, which is a bit broader. Those affected by your communication protocol and would be determined by your information need must be considered in selecting appropriate medium as well. So some of this you will start at the end and work backwards in your workbook, which will become more obvious when you actually get into your workbook. Frequency of communication is another key element of your protocol. So that's how often you're going to be using it. Basically, it varies depending on the need to engage with stakeholders and the necessity for information sharing. So now we're getting into developing those protocols. You need to review your goals and objectives. This is, again, is going to be an activity in your workbook. So you will be identifying an organisational goal in your workbook to develop a communication protocol. You need to ensure that the messaging aligns with the company reputation and culture and follows any required policies and procedures. So messaging is, in other words, the communication message, the way it's being presented. For example, it follows your logo use requirements, brand colours, image selection requirements, all of that. You'll need to address communication needs that are internal to the company, such as meeting minutes or evacuation plan, procedures, and external communication, such as communication with clients, emails, websites, and social media. A lot of content here. How are our brains going at the moment? Everybody's going for it? Fantastic. You're hopefully noticing a common theme as we spiral along. Things are getting repeated and building on the direction. Internal communication protocols. So this is very similar now to internal communication needs that we were talking about before. But again, coming up another layer of the spiral, we're going to discuss now what some of those internal communication protocols might be directly addressing. So risk-based communication is one type. This involves informing workers about risks, engaging in relevant consultations, and relaying information about how these risks ought to be managed. Now, this also comes under workplace health and safety, which you'll certainly be encountering if you're doing the personal training qualification or qualifications in your course package. But regardless of personal training, whenever you're a team leader or a manager, you have a responsibility to make sure that your workers understand all of the risks involved in what they're doing. Some of those should be maybe very obvious, but if it's specific to your workplace, then you're required to let your staff know about that. Other risks might be part of their previous training, which you don't need to inform them of because, you know, for example, trained medical staff already know what the risks are to themselves and how to handle those risks. For example, you know, protective gloves, all of that sort of thing. It's more when those risks are specific to your workplace. So example, work health consultations could be organisational wide is the scope. Persons responsible could be assigned workers. The medium would be on-site meetings or video conferences. Frequency could be bi-monthly. And the audience would be select workers representing different departments. Internal communication protocol, another one is emergency communication, involves informing workers about emergencies you often have no control over. If there is flood warnings, for example, or storm warnings, you might have to send your staff home early or, you know, whatever the case may be. Yeah, let's move along from that. Stakeholder communication. How we coordinate, collaborate and interact with customers. And that's going to occur regularly because no business exists without regular customer communication. One example could be how you're going to respond to questions via the Facebook page. The scope is the members of the marketing team. The persons responsible is a social media specialist and the medium is social media. The frequency is every time you receive a message and the audience is public. So this is a really good example that gives you a distinction between the audience and the scope. Another risk-based communication example, reporting incidents in the Bounce Fitness Centres. And again, your scope and your audience are very different there. So let's identify ways to adapt our communication protocols to suit varying contexts. Now, those contexts will usually be an audience context. But not necessarily. For example, you may have a physical context, which is the environment wherein you're communicating, whether that is taking place in a venue that you've hired to give a public presentation, or whether you're going to be around a work table with other team members. Social context concerns the relationship of those you would be communicating with each other. Cultural context concerns the cultural difference that would emerge on the basis of differences in religion, race, age, gender, etc. Adapting to physical context. Some of this is fairly common sense, but we'll go through the examples just for the sake of making sure everybody's imagination is keeping flexible. So adapting to physical context entails changing the way and medium of communication. So communicating in noisy areas, large spaces and or large audiences are some examples of the physical context that you might be communicating in. Now, if it's noisy, obviously you're going to need to perhaps turn up the volume of how you're communicating, whether that's speaking or whatever, maybe turning up the volume of a recorded message, whatever the case may be. Using a microphone or visual aids can be other ways of handling that. Communicating in small spaces, obviously you're going to need to lower the volume. Communicating with a superior, you're going to use more formal and straightforward language, which will be vastly different to the casual language that you might use with someone that you are very familiar with. Communicating with someone who is much older than you, ensure you're maintaining respect in a way that relates to them, and use polite language, which again might be a little bit more formal, but not necessarily. Just think about, age differences with the people that you know. Polite language might be just slowing down the speed at which you're speaking. Communicating with someone who is much younger than you, making sure that you're putting them at ease. Sometimes with small children, you'll see adults get down so that they're on eye level with the child rather than talking down to them, which can be intimidating or overbearing. And that's obviously not going to go too well between an adult that doesn't know the child and that child. Speaking more casually, sometimes just breaking down your communication so that it is less structured and bite-sized pieces. They're all examples of adapting your physical context, and we do it daily in our interaction with people, often intuitively. So this is all a part of becoming more conscious in the process. Adapting to cultural context entails changing the way you communicate by considering the specific needs of those you've interacted with. So those of us who've been in Australia for, a while will have perhaps noticed more cultural changes and increased exposure to cross-cultural exchanges that, maybe we weren't confronted with before. So, keeping up to date with the sort of skills that we need to have when dealing with different cultures is very important for inclusivity and respect and, ensuring our relationships with people can remain positive. Examples could be...
Sorry, Kat, I was going to just add on that one as well.
Perfect, thank you, Carl.
Yeah, I had an example the other day when one of the students asked me about this particular question where predominantly where she's opened up her health clinic, predominantly the area, it's from one ethnic background. So she wanted to engage other people to work within the clinic. And I've always said to them as well, learn about the area for the new people that she's going to try to engage with the health clinic, to learn about the ethnic background within and get themselves familiarized with the area, to know the type of background and the way we communicate, the way we interact with them is the most important part in any aspects. So, I think, Kat, you've touched on about the different type of communication, such as the body language, the eye contact, etc. Learn about all those different aspects.
Perfect.
They're very important to get to know your clients or the area that you're going to be working with.
So just to, if you don't mind me recapping on what you've just said, Carl, just to make sure everybody got that, because it's very important. Carl was talking about a combination of communication aspects then, including non-verbal, and the cultural differences in our non-verbal communication, which we were talking about previously. And if we're not aware of what we're doing with our non-verbal communication and the impact on that culture, then we can be sort of left floundering and not knowing why our communication isn't progressing well. And it could come down to something very small that we have overlooked. So checking in, look, we're all going to make mistakes. That's just the reality of being human. And there's nothing wrong with just checking in with the people that you're communicating with. Hey, was there something that I said that offended you? Did what I just explained, was that difficult for you? Was I missing something in explaining that? Do you have any questions about that? All of these are sort of ways that we can check in with people. Yeah.
But usually when you first when you first contact your clients, get to know your clients to the next level.
Beautiful.
Get to know your clients. Absolutely. Because if you don't get to know your clients, you will struggle to get to their level as well.
Absolutely. We're building rapport.
It's a building rapport.
It's not going to happen without the nonverbal, without you realizing what your nonverbal cues are as well. And this, that's another important aspect to this is when we talk about how we're going to be niching our business. And there's nothing wrong with you as a coach or personal trainer or allied health, whatever it is that you're going to be doing when and perhaps you're already doing it and you're here to just, further what you're doing and be more effective in what you're doing. There's nothing wrong with having a niche, but be careful with that as well, because there can be some who feel that they would like to be accessing your business for whatever reason, or a client who is suited to your business for whatever reason. There might be something in your marketing that has really grabbed them that they want to be part of. But perhaps you've niched yourself in a way that makes them feel excluded on a basis of culture or something else. So if you find somebody that is approaching you that way, let's just say, for example, you opened up a women's gym. And, it is possible that you might have certain parts of the population that feel offended by that. You don't have to, the more dogmatic we are about our niche, when it's unnecessary, the more we're going to, run into trouble. So it's just take cases like that on a one-on-one basis and get a feel for who the person is that is perhaps feeling excluded by the way you've niched yourself. And if you identify something that you feel is not within your scope of experience and expertise, there is nothing wrong with letting somebody know that, hey, I'd love to have you here, but I really feel that you're not going to get that much benefit from it because my expertise doesn't cover whatever that may be. And then you can leave it up to them to make the call as to whether they'd still like to participate or not, as long as they are also respecting particular processes within the way you run your business. So you can have your niche, you can have your boundaries, but at the same time, not be excluding people that you do feel well qualified to and able to service. Little bit of it's a bit of an area where we all need to perhaps do a little bit of growing and our understanding. Just because of a lot of diversity that's increasing in the day and age that we're in, and changing what we might take for granted as being culture. Yeah.
And the reason also, to Katrina, why we started with communication, because it's an important part of us understanding the communication, the way we speak, the way we interact. Some of you might be already working in that field. So what we want to do, we want to try to elevate your level of understanding and level of communication to the next level. To one day, you might be running your own clinic, you might be running your own personal PT sessions, or whatever might be your chosen field of it. But it's more better to understand the communication is a vital part of our everyday lives. And this is the reason why we're starting with communication. Yes, it is a bit bit of heavy topic. It is there's a lot of information to go through, but having said that, it's an important part of us to understand the reason why we're doing that first unit. Because we want to put you in the right path, we want to put you in the right direction, and by having the right skills for us to get to the next level, which is the communication level. Sorry, Kat, continue.
Awesome, thanks, Carl. Okay, so continuing with the cultural context, let's have a read of these examples because they actually do come up in your assessments again. So it can entail changing the way you communicate by considering the specific need of those you're interacting with. So when we're talking about cultural differences or cross-cultural contexts, we're talking about differences in our audience. Communicating with Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples could be a common one to encounter in Australia, but not necessarily. It might be people with, Asian background, or anything's possible in Australia because we're very multicultural and embracing to all backgrounds. Using similar language can be difficult if you don't have experience with that particular cultural background. There's nothing wrong with asking that person that if you're saying, hey, look, I've actually never spoken with someone from your particular background before, but I'd love to get more understanding about how to do that. And so, forgive me if I'm not, communicating with you well to start with, but I would like to improve, and perhaps you can help me with these words. And, I was certainly doing that in working with our New Zealand students, with many of which were Maori background, and getting to learn a few Maori words. And, that was all very new for me. Communicating with culturally and linguistically diverse, or CALD speakers. So that one is, just commit that one to memory. That one comes up in your assessments. Remain relaxed and open. Use simple language, and do not oversimplify your language. Because there's a language barrier, doesn't mean that that the person who you are speaking with has lesser intelligence. And particularly in the Western world, we can be quite arrogant about our academic achievements, and believing that academia is the gold standard of intelligence, when in fact that is not true. Academic learning is one style of learning, and academically acquired knowledge is one kind of knowledge, and really has no true indication of intelligence. It's one way that we can develop ourselves, and some people have more of a bent towards academic learning than others. So respecting cultural and languages differences certainly don't, and someone who perhaps comes from a less technologically developed background doesn't mean that they are lacking in intelligence. So be very careful about oversimplifying, but it's more about our language being relatable. Okay, so that actually brings us to the end of this webinar. I'm going to start on a tutorial next. Now, I understand that some of you may not be able to attend the tutorial, some may not be ready to do a tutorial. I'm going to give you all a few minutes break. How are we going for time so far? We've just gone over the hour by a few minutes. Let's have a 5-minute break, and then I'll come back and start the tutorial with you. And it's just going to be for whoever can or wants to attend. And for those who can't, then there should be a recording, and we may even work on another time.